Hello coders and welcome to another How to Code Well podcast. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about development over 30. I'm joined by Stephen Doherty here, who is a web developer in the US. Hi Stephen, how are you doing? Have you had a good week?
Hey, I'm doing well, thank you. And it's been a great week. It's Friday, so made it through another one.
Yeah, Friday is awesome. Made it through another one. I like that quote. So, we're going to be talking about after 30 being a developer. So let's just assume that you are over 30. I don't really want to ask your age, but is that correct? You just have to nod.
That's correct, yes.
So may I ask, what did you do before you were 30?
Yeah, so I was actually an life accident and health insurance agent. It's a family business. My father's been doing it for 40 years, followed his footsteps after college, and I did that in a couple of different stints. From cold calling clients, walking into businesses trying to sell, to managing other companies, their clients, and helping them with their benefit enrollments and things like that. So,
gosh, wow, okay. How long did you do that for?
7 years. I did that.
7 years.
Mm-hmm.
So you were dealing with clients, right? You were dealing with people. Mm-hmm. It was a people thing,
yes.
Right? Very people orientated and quite technical as well, by the sounds of it.
Yeah. It's go ahead.
Well, I'm just going to say that, there was I would imagine that you would have to review a lot of sort of users' cases and sort of their requirements, and sort of delve into what they need on a case-by-case basis. Is that correct? I don't know. I've got no idea.
Nope.
What.
Yep, that's exactly what it is.
Right. Wow. And you did that for 7 years. Gosh.
7 years, yeah.
And did you were you trained in that before you did that professionally?
No, I had to take an exam to get my license, but aside from that, it was just watching my father do it as I grew up. Occasionally, I get to go with him on enrollment, so it was pretty second nature.
Okay.
No real formal training. It's really you learn as you go. That's really how the field works.
Right, but you did a course, an exam, right?
Yes, correct. Yep.
How long did that take?
The course, it's really try to cram as much as you can, spit it all out on a computer, but it literally took me 5 times to pass it. So that was a surprise. I didn't expect to have to take it 5 times, but I did finally manage that. But it wasn't easy. There's, insurance isn't the type of concepts you deal with every day.
No.
Even growing up with them. So it was a struggle. Yeah.
Blimey. So, okay, I'm just trying to work out like the time frame in terms of like you doing that for 7 years and then being, and before that being sort of trained or taught to do that. Is that the way the process happened? Did you like come out of school and then sort of just and pick that up, or did you do a course in that or something?
Oh yeah, pretty much just graduated and then picked it up. So it was, decided I would go and work for my dad in his insurance group. Studied for the exam. I mean, I was still able to work with him without the license, but you can do a lot more with the license.
Sure.
So studied for that. And so really I would say that was within the first year. Right. So I took that test versus working with him to taking the test to passing it. So.
Okay. So yeah, that's quite a long time, isn't it? 7, 8, yeah. Yeah, going on for sort of like pointing into the direction of a decade almost. Would that be correct?
That'd be correct.
Wow. Okay. So what did you do before that? Let's go back a little bit after that. Well, before that, I should say.
Sure, yeah. So I had college. I was working part-time there, and then I also used to work for a cell phone company selling cell phones. It was pretty much commission-based, but another people-oriented job,
right?
Which, ironically, is not my strong point, working with people. My dad, it's second nature. For me, it's a struggle. So I always like to challenge myself, and that's how I ended up in that field. But really just college and working part-time doing that.
May I ask why you say it was a struggle for you yourself?
Working with people? That's a great question I've asked myself for, 10 years. It's one of those things that as soon as I get past that initial icebreaker, like it's done, like as soon as I started, even this podcast, really, like there's this apprehension, even though I've stood in front of groups of 200 people and given a presentation or any of that, there's just always this tightness that builds up. But as soon as you get going, then it releases and you're good to go. But it's the same thing for 10 years. You just kind of learn to push it down and know that it's you're going to come over the hump as soon as you get going.
Cool.
That's the biggest part.
Yeah, some solid advice there. I like that. Okay, so you did school, and then you did a course, then you did the job for a fair amount of years. What happened at the 7th year? Did you wake up one day and go, actually, I want to do web development? How did that transition evolve?
Yeah, so this is a fun story. At least I always think it's a fun story. So I was actually about 25 is when I was watching. My wife and I used to watch HGTV, which is the home. They always have the House Hunters TV show.
Okay,
we used to watch that a lot.
Yeah,
and there were always these people on there that were working remotely, and they were doing something in technology, some web developer or something. I thought, man, how great would that be to be able to do something like that? Because at the time, I was traveling 3 hours round trip to Kansas City for another insurance related job. So we watched that, and then one evening, I was sitting there and I thought, well, how does a website even work? And I thought, well, I'm just going to start at the top, and I started reading articles. Well, the next thing I know, it was 4 a.m, and I've been reading about this since about 8 o'clock that night and trying and really kind of like my first hello world going. But besides the fact I knew I got to go to sleep because I have to drive soon, I realized I might be onto something that I might actually really enjoy because that, the time flew and I was hooked from there. Then it really became the struggle of learning how to do something like this, as broad as the field is, on your own. That was probably the next big challenge. And I spent, 2 or 3 years, I think, just really trying to hone a path. I mean, trying to understand you come across PHP and C# and C++ and trying to figure in JavaScript and HTML. You're wondering how all these things work together. Because I had zero background. I always loved technology. I love fiddling with things, but that was really the kick that got me going. Though, was just asking, how does a website work, and it was all downhill from there. So.
Yeah, I kind of see this as like the whole. You say the broadness of it. I personally see the whole thing like a massive jigsaw puzzle that is constantly changing.
Yeah, exactly right.
You might have the edge pieces correct. But the further you delve down, the more pieces you find.
Exactly. That's it's still that way. I mean, even after a year, it's still, I'm just like, wow. Well, even after a year of being a developer, where I'm getting even more in depth. But that was a solid 5 years total of really trying to understand that. So,
okay, so you tried to study it for 5 years before jumping in. So does that mean that you were doing that whilst working in insurance? Yeah. So here's where the transition starts to happen. Is that I live in a small town of 7,000 people, so that's why I have to commute an hour and a half to Kansas City. Once I was working up there for a different job. Once I left my dad's office. Yeah.
But I knew that's what I wanted to get toward, and so what I did is I started trying to find these different niches where I could find a way to more or less automate my job and open up time for me to learn more to make my job even easier and continue learning while getting paid. That was really my goal. And that is what I did. And I went from working at an insurance company to one of our, another company that used to be called Benefits Connect, but it was a benefit administration system. It was a software as a service. And I was able to eventually, through a roundabout way, get a job with them as an account manager, where I thought if I can get into a technology company, then I can start working my way toward that development department was my goal. And that could become a whole other story in itself, I guess. But my goal was really just to keep trying to find ways to use the time that I had at work to increase what I knew, what I was learning, while trying to simultaneously make my job easier and automate it is really what I did. It was a fun time. It was a lot of learning, and it was pretty cool.
Is it right to say then you were trying to find parallels between like the coding side of it and the automation of what you were trying to do in your day-to-day working in insurance? I really like that. That is, that's really, really interesting because you've got a very niche set of problems, I would imagine, in insurance, and you're trying to find a solution to those problems. I have no idea what they could possibly be because I've never worked in insurance. But you're doing that through learning development and coding. That's very, very cool.
It was. I'll tell you, a fun thing about it was the first real breakthrough I had that I thought, maybe I can do this, was I used to have to run insurance quotes every day. So that consisted of getting people's name, date of birth, what their price range was, et cetera. And I realized after I'm typing these into the same website every day, there's got to be something out there I can find that I could maybe upload these and do it. And Selenium testing library became my savior, because with that I could automate the clicks, I could automate the upload, and all of a sudden I went from spending 6 hours of my day doing this because it was the busiest time of year to where I suddenly had 6 hours of doing whatever I wanted and learning more about coding, because I was able to automate that entire process.
That is so cool. I like that so much. Yeah. I love that story. You found you found a solution through learning what you want to do to solve a problem that you were doing anyway.
Yeah.
That is so cool.
I did.
Yeah, that's so cool. And you end up with being more productive in the insurance job, and you end up learning testing, because that's what the Selenium framework's all about. That's fantastic. That really is cool. That's such an inspirational story. I must say, for anyone listening on the podcast and watching on the YouTubes here, I personally have come strictly from a coding background, so I've had no experience with anything else apart from websites. So hearing someone who wants to go into web development by learning web development through trying to find a solution in their usual day-to-day is such an interesting, fascinating story. Would you recommend that path to those who are trying to get into development? Sort of like, would you recommend looking upon what they do and seeing if there's any ways that they can automate it using the skills that they're trying to learn? Is that something that you would recommend?
Yeah. I'd say 100%, because even once I was able to do that, then we had this other problem I was able to spend time on, which was it was a call center where we're enrolling people, but we would get these floods of people. And long story short, I realized that if we could just schedule these people, because they're being told when to sign in by their human resource officer. So what if we just create a website for them that just houses through an iframe just the scheduling software, and then we could just do that, have it automatically schedule, and all of a sudden we went from having calls all week to now I'm able to put this little website together through some cheap hosting website, but secure. And now we're able to move an entire week-long worth of enrollments and put them into 1 or 2 days booked back-to-back. So you're able to, again, use that knowledge of how a website works and solve another problem.
One of the biggest challenges I hear from people wanting to get into the industry is what applications should they learn to build first? But you're looking upon your day-to-day and you're seeing solutions in lots of different areas, and you're coming up with the projects yourself. It's not just like the standard Hello World stuff. It's I need to, and you've also got the incentive that if you are to develop it and it works well, then that's going to save you a lot of time. Yeah, that's a very interesting skill to have, to be aware of that at that stage in your career. That's fantastic. Okay, so what technologies were you playing with when you started this?
Yeah, so I somehow managed to jump straight into PHP, which was, I think, because I was trying to figure out now that I've got this, I guess, the basic website working. I've got the HTML, the CSS doing what I wanted to. How do I really start making this more dynamic? And I made my way to PHP somehow. Never got very far with it, but really ended up going more of the HTML, JavaScript, jQuery route is where I ended up going. So
awesome.
That was where I got started.
Okay. And is that something that you're still pursuing, those kind of technologies at the moment? So the HTML and the jQuery, I still use those quite a bit. The one thing about my job that I end up getting, we do a lot more. It's much more broad, to where I've eventually delved into VB6 and C#, but we still have our own web applications that we're having to do. So I'm still having to do the HTML and CSS and JavaScript. So
It's all. There's always a use for it. Someone always needs a static website.
Mm-hmm.
That's always a big thing too.
Definitely. Okay, so let's move away from the technical skills. Is there any skills, and I would imagine there's quite a few skills that are non-technical skills that you gained from doing insurance that you've been able to take in with you to your current role at the moment?
Yeah, definitely would be, like you talked earlier, it's essentially like it's a use case. With someone with insurance, not every plan fits everybody. You can't just throw out some generic plan and it's going to solve their needs. Insurance is extremely broad in the United States anyway. It's very broad. But learning how to listen to what people are actually saying, not what's coming out of their mouth, I guess you might say. So they may be saying, I just need a simple plan. Like, well, we could get you a simple plan. It's going to cost you a lot more, but if that's what you really want. But maybe if we can dig a little deeper, see what your real concerns are, then we can get you one that's actually going to be cheaper, but cover you better in the long run. And that's dealing with people every day when I want this website built and I want this button to do this. Like, well, I see what you're saying, but now let's actually dive into it and let me, kind of solicit this information that I need to get in order to really understand what you truly need so we don't waste everybody's time. That was probably the biggest one, is just learning to pause, learning how to read people, you might say, and try to understand more of what's really going on, what's really being asked. That was a huge one. The second one would probably be communication in general. Just being able to, I read a lot of things on Quora or other websites where there's always this struggle. I'm sure it's going to differ from who the people are you're working with, but the people I've worked with, it seems like that communication barrier doesn't seem to exist. Because I've had to deal with people in very stressful situations, talk to them in good times, bad times, and you just learn how to really kind of work with the flow and get that dialogue going. And I think it seems like that's a very vital thing in this industry that maybe isn't quite there.
Yeah, I would imagine that insurance exposes you to all sorts of conversations, good and bad, that and there's always a financial implication.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. Yeah. That's an interesting skill set to have. That really is. We as developers, we are constantly writing code for human beings, for building websites for people. It's their requirements. We don't get a requirement from a computer. We get a requirement from a person, and it's something that has really been highlighted to me. Talking to many people on the podcast, and it is the conversation. It's that soft skill. It's having the ability to delve into what the person is saying, and then try and translate that into something technical. Either if that's you talking to a non-technical about a technical solution, or perhaps it is just, like you said, fully understanding the requirements. Because sometimes people will say something that isn't necessarily, I'm not saying it's what they meant to do. It's not necessarily what they're after. It's what they think they're after. And I guess it's our job to sort of try and make sure that what they are after is definitely what they're after, rather than what they think is, they need.
Exactly.
You're almost like reading in between the lines a little bit, just sort of like, also with us, the stuff that we do, something I mentioned, I think before even this podcast started, is that lots of things change and evolve. So it's understanding what the client's needs are, not just today, but also in the next sort of 3 months, 6 months, a year's time. Is the stuff that you're going to build today going to be what they're after afterwards? What is their project roadmap? Because, there's no point in building a blog if they want an e-commerce shopping cart.
Right. Exactly right.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, it sounds like you've got an amazing set of skills that you've just been able to plonk onto web development, and I would personally see that as an advantage. Do you see that as an advantage yourself?
I didn't realize until I really started to get in the field, because naturally there's always that imposter syndrome, I think, when you first start. The thought, I was in insurance, these guys I'm working with just graduated college with a computer science degree, they're not self-taught anything. For the most part, they have definitely all these major strengths that I kept comparing myself to. But then I started to realize, no, I really do bring something of my own to this. Like there's a value in experience. There's a value in understanding how a company works, which you also learn in the insurance industry from top to bottom. There's a value in understanding the requirements and what the CEO wants, and also trying to understand the needs of, the lowest paid person in the company and what's being offered. So it was definitely an advantage. And I'm just I feel like I'm learning that more the longer I'm in this, and kind of seeing those shine through.
Awesome. So. Yeah. I would also say that because you've worked with your dad, family business, I would imagine that you've got a strong work ethic. It is a family thing, right? So if you have a bad day, then it's not just a company that you can walk away from.
Exactly. 10 o'clock, 1 a.m, doesn't matter. I'm going to hear about it. So.
Yeah. And again, that's something that is definitely needed in web development is the dedication and the patience and the persistence of you have a bug and you need to fix it, and you've probably, depending on the situation, got a small window to do it in because perhaps it's a live thing, maybe, I don't know. A lot of people crumble at the thought of that.
Yeah.
It can be a high stressed career, this web development, I think.
Yeah, it sure can.
Yeah. Okay, so we've discussed about the advantages. Well, what are the disadvantages of coming into the industry at that particular age after learning a completely different set of skills?
Sorry, did I cut you off there?
I was just asking. What do you see any disadvantages to yourself coming in? You mentioned imposter syndrome, but is there anything else that you've experienced?
Yeah, so the imposter syndrome. Also, just one thing I've learned is the learning the vernacular of the language. I've spent 7 years in the industry where I know the acronyms. I know what people are talking about. I know, I know when they say an accident policy, I know what that means. I know what an HSA is. I know all these things. Coming to the insurance world, or coming to the development world, it's so many things that I've just never heard of. Like when I had my interview, they asked me if I have familiarity with OOP, and I was like, OOP, I'm not sure if I do. And he said, object-oriented programming. I was like, oh my gosh, of course, like that's everything I do when I'm trying to do this stuff. So it's just it's shaking those, not cobwebs, because I haven't been around long enough to have cobwebs, but it's just feeling relaxed, feeling comfortable, and trusting yourself enough to know that it'll get there. Number one, like you'll get there. You'll learn the language. Most of the people that are working there are younger, but they've been in this for at least 4 years, or maybe longer if they've been doing it before this. So, but that was a big one, because it's just trying to effectively communicate with the developers as well as the people you're trying to build stuff for. So
sure. Yeah, I mean, that's something that I think. With the new technologies that come out, there is all sorts of different acronyms and things become trendy. And I mean, I'm not saying that OOP is trendy. It's sort of like a fundamental foundation of programming. But there are things, acronyms that come in. I guess it's the same maybe for insurance. There are things that come in, policies that come in to play 1 year and they're not there the next, or something like that. Yeah. Same with frameworks, with various frameworks, JavaScript frameworks and PHP frameworks and libraries and stuff. And the whole thing is an evolving organic beast. Especially when you throw into the cauldron pot things like SEO, and you've got security and all the other factors that really alter and change and manipulate this broad 2 words that make up web development. There's all sorts of things that change and evolve. The stuff that I was doing in my first ever year is certainly not the stuff that I do today. I mean, and that's not simply the case of I know more today than I did when I first started. It's also the case that the stuff that I did when I started just doesn't exist.
Right.
I remember learning things like a whole programming languages that just don't exist anymore. Or they do exist. I shouldn't say they don't exist. They do exist, but they don't exist as they used to. Like, for example, ActionScript and Flash. You know, remember Flash, the Flash little sort of, I think it's SWFs they would have on the rich medias and stuff where things would pop out on the screen, and you know, it was kind of like much before things like YouTube and all of that stuff, where you actually had videos. People were animating these things, and you could program them using ActionScript, which is very similar to JavaScript, but nobody does it anymore. And because of Apple, you know, Flash is dead. So so you've got all those other, that's what I'm trying to say, that you've got all these other sort of influences that mold and change this whole world of web development. Take, for example, PWAs, for instance, progressive web apps. This is a new technology that, or relatively new compared to other bits and pieces. And it's always adapting and changing. And we as developers must do that as well. But how have you found, when you started web development, when you first put your toe in the water, what was your first reaction to this world? Was it excitement, or was it trepidation? What was where was your head when you did that?
I would say I was too excited to really understand just how big it is and what I was really getting myself into.
Yeah.
You know, because it was just this. I could always find a new topic, something, just keep diving deeper and deeper and deeper to understand what's going on. And so it's kind of like you just keep running, and next thing you stop and realize you're in the middle of a battlefield. Is kind of how it felt. It's like, oh, you know, here you are, you're a developer now, and it's like, man, how did I get here? You know, when did this happen? So it was.
The more you eat, the hungrier you are. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, exactly right.
And you mentioned that you were learning this whilst you were in insurance. So were you doing this in the evenings, or was it a morning thing? Did you have a schedule?
Yeah. Once, like I said, with Selenium, once I realized that, you know, I have this ability to automate things, like it was, you know, rubber meets the road kind of a thing. Like it was off and running. So then it was anytime I could do it. Then, you know, naturally your supervisors and people start to realize, and they want other things automated. And from there, it kind of led into macros, you know, with Excel, which you have your own little IDE there essentially, and you're essentially coding in VB6, but you're still able to solve these same solutions, more technical, but you're able to get paid while you're learning. You know, it was really, unless there was something pressing going on, that's what I was doing. I was either trying to automate something or trying to use the time that I had gained to learn something new, and keep progressing to be prepared to make that transition one day.
That sounds awesome. Can I ask how you approached your family business with this, sort of building programs to automate stuff? Was that the way you sort of sold it?
So when I told my dad that I eventually told him that I was going to take another job, which I was actually kind of scared to do, because you know, when I tell him you're leaving, it's not a huge business. It's not very many people. So one person leaving is a big deal. Yeah. But when he told me, I wasn't really doing Selenium at that point, but I was really starting to dive more into websites, partly because the Healthcare Reform Act in the United States, where we now have this different type of insurance, and now there's a website, healthcare.gov or healthcare.gov, or I can't remember what it is now. It's been a while. But when I told him, he said, I'm not surprised that you spend more time looking at the programs and diving into the website of healthcare.gov and trying to see how that works in the forms. And so I'm not surprised you're taking this other job where, which essentially I would be working on that healthcare.gov website, or helping people enroll in it, not the website itself. But he wasn't surprised is what it came down to, because he had an eye, he noticed what I was doing, and I was doing less of the insurance and more of the, how does this work? So it was interesting. He wasn't excited, but he was excited because he could see where my passion was going. So he was supportive.
Oh, that's really good to hear. That's great to hear. It's always good when you have support, and I appreciate the difficulty of doing that, coming up to that conclusion and approaching your dad with that, you know, the opportunity because it is a family business. There is, there's an emotional attachment to that. Okay, so let's talk now a little bit about age, if you don't mind, because there are loads of people who have gotten in touch with me before, and they have said that they haven't been able to, or they don't feel like they are able to do web development because they are of a certain age. And personally, I think that the ages that they come to me with are extremely young. But I wanted to get your take on this because, you've done a completely different role for a very long time, and you are an example of someone who has moved in a completely different direction in your career. So I guess it's obvious to say that it's possible, but I just wanted to ask you, what advice do you have to those people who are asking the questions of, just because I haven't done this at college, or just because I haven't done this when I was 18 upwards? Is there any advice that you can give to those people? Because, I mean, like I said, I have been a web developer since I can remember, and I feel very disingenuous if I was to give any advice, because it's not my cup of tea. But sure. Do you have any advice?
Yeah, I would say the biggest piece of advice I can give is that naturally getting your confidence up. People have said, you're always going to have that, or at least I had that imposter syndrome coming into it this late in my life compared to being 18. But really, the biggest thing I think I did to really start getting my confidence with that I'd be building a product for other people was realizing that, what I did is I realized in a small town, plenty of small businesses, one or two people run it, a husband and wife, that would love a website but don't have a website. Well, I thought these are perfect people to reach out to because, for one, they're not going to have high expectations, and two, they are going to just be elated to have an actual website and tell their friends, hey, I got a website. So I started trying to reach out to these companies and let them pay for the hosting for the $7 on GoDaddy or Name.com, wherever. And then start actually getting a real world experience and failures, and without having to worry about, you managed to convince this $10,000 job you got, and you have no idea what you were doing, but you sold it really well, and now it's crashed and your reputation's gone. But being older, just like in insurance, you tend to sell more as you get older, which you could say is related to the fact that you are gaining more experience, but it's also related to the fact people tend to trust you with things they don't understand when you're older versus when you're younger. And so it made reaching out to these people and talking to them and letting them, or getting them to let me try and build these websites for them became a very valuable thing for me. So I was able to build 3 or 4 of those, or 5, and that I didn't really get paid for them because that's not what I was looking for. I was looking for the real world experience. I wanted to see, how does SEO actually work? I wanted to see, how does Google Analytics work? I want to see all this with real people. And that did wonders for my confidence because I thought, I'm doing this for real people. I'm doing it for 2 people. Sure, it's not for a website that has 500 people coming to it every hour or more, but it is giving me a chance to get my toe in the water and say, I can do this. And I think it's an easy way for people to really get into this that are, older and don't have that confidence, and just go get the confidence on your own. Don't try to figure it out and wait for someone to tell you that you've arrived, because I don't think you're ever going to feel that way in this industry. It's too broad. But you can definitely get out there, try and find people, your own family even. Just get something started. Getting that real world experience is vital, I think. So
that's some really solid advice there. That's some really good advice. Definitely get some real world experience. Okay, so where are you at the moment? What you're obviously a web developer, right? So are you working for a company, working for yourself? What is it that you do?
Yep. So I work for a company here in Fort Scott, Kansas is where it's at. So the Midwest of the United States. But it's a window manufacturing company, actually. So we have a lot of our websites that we've done are more internal, but now we're starting to reach back out to the clients, trying to create this more holistic experience for them. So now we're actually doing more of the external facing website, web development, app development for all these salesmen and other things. So it's growing into that. So it's literally from our website that we have, just our normal Peerless Products one, all the way to building a mobile app using Xamarin Forms and going that direction, and everything in between there. But it's a pretty exciting place, and it's because it's we're just getting to do all this stuff, I guess you could say, and it's pretty cool. But that's where we're at right now, doing a little bit of a lot. Remind me what Xamarin Forms are. Yeah, so Xamarin Forms is it's cross mobile development. So for Android, iOS, UWP, it's written in. You can use C# to do it, and so it's not so much web development as it is mobile development, but it's definitely a Microsoft C# type direction. But so we are doing a ton of amazing things with websites right now, I guess you could say. So, but we're starting to do more of them, and that's been good. So, I got my foot in the door.
How did you find that? How did you find that job?
Yeah, so it ended up being in my hometown, which then you say, well, that's why this whole thing worked, because it's in your hometown. Well, before I even knew this company existed, I was working for a technology company, the Benefits Connect in California. So I'd fly out there once a month for a week, and it really just came down to having a conversation, because they said they want to become more of a technology company. And I thought, well, I'll go talk to them, because that sounds pretty cool in Fort Scott, America. Ended up talking to them and finding out what I was doing, what I did, what I'd done. Some of those websites that I had built before, they knew, they'd talked to people or seen that, so it gave me, again, credibility. And that was how I ended up eventually landing a job there as a developer, which I think is also an important thing. I think a lot of people, they want to immediately go to Google. They want to go work for Google or Amazon or Hulu or Netflix to get these first jobs. But I think if you keep your ear to the grindstone kind of a thing and look in places you wouldn't expect it to, maybe it is a manufacturing company. Maybe it is some place that doesn't have the greatest web presence. Oh, well, that's something you can offer them immediately. Like, why don't you have a web presence? Why can't I be that guy? Why can't I go and help you with this? There are more places than just the ones that scream out to you every day and to help get your feet wet and get going and give you the ability to learn and grow. So
definitely. Coding, regardless of what it is so needed in pretty much every industry. So it's weird that web development has this sort of, I wouldn't say a misconception, but it's kind of like one of these sort of things where people think, well, I'm just building websites. But the skill of just building a website can be used in so many different things. It's not just building something that you click on a refresh button and, go left and right and click on different pages. That's just it's just literally scratching the surface. I mean, you talked about going into doing PHP and jQuery. You mentioned the Xamarin Forms. That you're now playing with different technologies and different hardware. You're having to deal with mobile phones, right at the start of this, you were talking about how you were writing code for the insurance problems that you were facing, the solutions that you were developing for that. So on the off, you've had the exposure of building solutions for things that aren't necessarily on the web.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Okay. So was this role advertised anywhere? Did you jump on a job board? What was the process of actually getting that job?
Yeah, so they did have one, and really I just reached out to the developer, the IT manager, essentially is what he was titled, and just told him, hey, I heard you're doing some really great things. And it was just a genuine interest in what they were doing, because I have a natural sense of wonder. I always wonder what's happening, how's this working, what's going on. And so that's what I wanted to find out. Like, what is this company in Fort Scott, America doing? I was genuine, and I wanted to learn more. And I was like, this sounds amazing. And so I just emailed to him, and he said he would be happy to meet and learn more about it. And then he ended up offering me the ability to come and do an interview with him and the other head developer there. And that was how it worked out. But it was just right place, right time, maybe. I don't know.
And how did you find the interview?
How did what?
How did you find the interview? Was it you mentioned imposter syndrome before? So did that kick in, or where?
Oh yeah, I was expecting it to be like everything I wrote out, where I have 72 different types of algorithms now implemented from scratch for me. Which again, that's definitely going to be the case. But really, what was neat about them is they were looking more like how do you approach a problem? How do you think about this? because they felt that even if you don't have the greatest depth of understanding, if you're able to think logically about this and approach this solution, that's what they were looking for mainly. And you had experience doing something, because they don't want to start completely from scratch. But it was scary. It's a great word, but once I got in there and it was over, I was like, this wasn't so bad. Like I knew more than I thought I did, and that I give myself credit for up to that point. So, it's an interview and it's a new field. It's not something I've been discussing since I was a kid. So it was all new.
Can I ask, was there any other jobs that you went for whilst you were looking for a role?
Yeah, there was one at a company locally. They actually reached out to me because they had seen one of those websites that I had done just on the side trying to help people. And so they reached out, so they were needing a web developer. And it didn't quite work out financially to be really worth the transition from what I was being paid. So I just set it on the back burner and moved along. But I was pretty selective in my search.
Sure.
Also that.
That's really good that you had I'm assuming a portfolio of stuff that you were able to almost advertise yourself. That's really good. I think that's such an important thing that new developers should get, is a portfolio of all their work, even if it's not very good work, because it shows you progression, and it also shows the person who is looking for developers what they've been exposed to. And I mean, I would imagine all the programs that you've written in the past would be fantastic to demonstrate. And have you ever demonstrated anything that you've done in your insurance life?
Have I ever demonstrated anything?
Like the things that you were building, the programs you were building to make your insurance easier.
I never got to demonstrate it in front of like a large group of people, but I definitely made sure to put that on my resume and tell them about it and explain how I did it using Selenium. I guess something I left out too is Python was actually the first language I learned officially. I kept mentioning PHP. I eventually did move on to Python because it was ubiquitous in the ability to use it on any type of platform. That was the first website I actually built. That right before I got this job was my mother had a small business of her own, and I tried building an application to help her. Well, that's not so important as it is that I had that GitHub repository, and I was able to share that with my employer now. So here's another example of some programs that I've done. And you mentioned having a website, and having that portfolio is good, and having a GitHub repository was also really good because they could go through and see what I was doing. But I think I got off track there a little bit, but I just remembered that part of it. I
mean, the GitHub stuff is fantastic because it not only shows the employer the projects that you're up to, but it also shows them the code that you write and how you write it. That is as raw as it gets.
That's true.
Yeah. Blimey. Yeah, I remember doing some interviews and having to do tests, and the tests, after the tests were done, they would be printed out and handed around to other developers to assess.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I wasn't aware of this until someone mentioned it, and it was like, oh yeah, I saw the code that you wrote for the test. We were all assessing the candidates. That was proper nervous.
I bet. I can only imagine. That was the nice thing, is that I think even while searching for this job, being an older person, not having that background, being self-taught, not having a degree to throw yourself out, it's just as important to find the right place that's going to give you a chance as well. Like someone that's going to understand the value of you, the value of what you do bring to the table, and not just look at you and say, you don't have a computer science degree? All right, goodbye, next. They always say with the job, it has to be a good fit for you, just as much as it has to be a good fit for them. And this company, I waited. I didn't just start applying everywhere because I didn't want to get stuck in that situation. Okay. But it definitely, finding that one and waiting to find the one that's going to understand your needs, where you're at, and what you can bring, that's hugely important as well.
Yeah, definitely. I certainly agree with that. Definitely, because you have found a really good foundation to springboard from, because you could have just found any old development job without any kind of need of looking into what they could offer you and what you could offer them, and you could really hate it. And that would be your first ever experience as a web developer in the quote unquote professional world. And I really agree with that. The first ever job that you ever take in web development is so important, and it is so important to get the right one, and be patient, like you said, and wait for the right one. Can I ask, how long did it take between getting this position from perhaps deciding that you wanted to now switch careers? How long did that transition take?
It took. I knew I wanted to make the transition. Again, it's being sure that was the right fit, that was the right place. I felt really comfortable about it. The transition itself from the career into the new one was probably 2 months from the time of his interview to finally giving them an okay and leaving my previous employer. But the biggest challenge was my wife. She was not too excited about me making this career switch suddenly, doing something like that, which is perfectly natural. We have a family, we have 2 children. She doesn't want me to feel like I'm just riding off into the West. But it felt longer because she was very apprehensive about it, and it was making sure we were both okay with it before we moved on. But as far as whenever I decided I really wanted to be a developer, though, that I knew that from that time I watched that or started diving into that website. So I was ready to make the switch whenever I could, that I felt comfortable enough. So,
what may I ask? What kind of discussions did you have with your wife to come up with how should I put this? To come up with a transition? What was the things that you were talking about and discussing about the risks involved in this career switch?
Sure. It was with it being a smaller town, coming from working in California, I'm working in Sacramento. I'm 45 minutes away from San Francisco. Without traffic, I guess that would be the case. But it's going from a career like that where I was working to this more of a niche type thing that I'm doing in the Midwest, which isn't exactly known for its technological innovations. It was job security, I guess is what it came down to. Like, what do you do if this doesn't work out? What do you do when you've had this for 7 years and now you've jumped on this train? That was a hard one to make, and I imagine anybody would, trying to make a transition to something you are telling. I don't know a lot about this. I've learned a lot. I've studied a lot on my own, and then working with your significant other, your wife, your spouse, to get them to trust you. Like, that you have thought about this. This has been a 5-year thing, and as we talked about it, it slowly made its way to where she was able to take a bigger breath and let it out a little bit. So I guess it's like you're talking about the risks, the possibilities. The job security is definitely one. You mentioned that you've got children. There's a lot riding upon a career switch. But then, you do these things because they spark happiness and pleasure in oneself. I don't know about you, but it's a very fulfilling thing, right? Web development, building things for people, it is so good. And and money isn't everything. Money's not everything, no. But I appreciate the conversations you may have had, because there have been sort of conversations that I've had with my significant other about moving. It's certainly not on par with career change, but it's on par with moving away from family. Sure. There's always that sort of weighing up. What in a different parallel universe would be happening right now if I didn't do that? Right.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Well, it sounds like you've pushed on to something really awesome. You sound like you've landed a really good job. Is there career progression there where you are at the moment?
Yeah, the company's growing, so there's always that opportunity. When I started, there were I was the second developer left. I guess you could say, because they'd had some switches. But we've grown from the 4 that were there to now we're pressing toward 8 or 9, and they just keep adding more because they're really pushing to become that technology type of company for Windows. And that's the company's growing, and frankly, I'm having so much fun. I haven't really thought beyond that because they're encouraging. And this isn't just like, oh, hey, here's a fanboy for my company. Like, it's been a really great company to work at. I couldn't ask for a better first experience. But they provide you the tools to learn. They encourage you to learn. The first 3 months I spent just having to watch Pluralsight videos. I got to work on some projects after my first month and a half. But if you want to learn something, you need to learn something. They will give you the tools. If you need something better, they have no problem getting it for you. It's not a tug of war of using antiquated equipment and philosophies. They always want to push best practices, doing things right, and what do you need to do your job well. So it's whatever they're doing. They're creating a foundation for me to work wherever I want to in the future. Right? So it's pretty incredible.
That's wonderful. Wonderful to hear. Now, at the start of this podcast, you mentioned that you looked at some, I think you said you watched a TV show, and the TV show had people working in tech remotely. Is this something that you are now doing? Are you doing anything remotely in terms of the web? Is this part of the job role maybe?
Yeah, no. So I still have a couple different smaller companies that I can do their websites for on the side. At this point, they're just WordPress because they don't have any arching demands. But now we're starting to look more like, well, what about a mobile application? Or what about maybe WordPress is getting too bulky and it's slowing down this website a lot. So maybe we should look at maybe doing something more custom. But that's still the ultimate goal, is to get to that point where I can do this on my own one day. And there's always room in the evenings for finding someone else who needs a website or something to work on. So it's a balance at the end of the day as well. So that's when my little kids get a little bit bigger, let them get a little older, then I'll start pursuing that more. But it's all the steps in the right direction.
Awesome. So that's so good to hear. That's so good to hear. Okay, so before we head off into the distance, do you have any social media links that you want to shout out? Any URLs that you want to mention? I actually am an administrator on. Have you heard of the website Quora? Quora. I have. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a space there. It's more like it's like a group, but it's called Source Code. So it's Quora.com/source-code, and it's the idea is it's the source behind the code. It's kind of really digging down from how everything got to this point and understanding what you're dealing with every day and getting a deeper understanding and knowledge of that. And it's sharing different answers and different articles about all those things. So it's a group that we share, and there's a lot of followers, which has been a lot of fun getting feedback. And that's probably the only one I've got, though. So go join that one if you want.
No worries. Do you know the URL off your head? Is it a massive URL, or is it something you can mention?
Yeah, no, it's Quora.com/source-code.
Cool.
Yeah.
I will put the links in the description below and on the screen here. But have you got anything else that you want to add to this before we head off?
No, I think I got the main points there. Like those really were the big things that got me in the right direction. So, just thank you very much for having me on here. I appreciate it. That's
perfectly fine. You're an inspirational chap. I love hearing stories like yours where you've done something completely different and you've strived, and you sound like you're such a dedicated fella who has gone for this thing that you saw it off of a TV show and you just sort of dived headfirst in, and you were solving problems in your current position whilst learning. I mean, that's just such an amazing thing to do. That has blown my mind, I must say, because I just want to point that out because there are so many people who ask, what applications should I be building? Should I do a to-do app? I've got nothing to put on a to-do app, but should I build it anyway? And you've managed to find solutions to your everyday problems in your old position. And as you're doing it, you're learning how to code. And that is amazing, because you come away with not only being efficient in your day-to-day job, but you're also building yourself up as a developer, and you then have something to show other people at the end of it. Yeah. So you're, a winner in my book.
Thank you.
Thank you ever so much for coming on the show, Stephen. It's been a pleasure to speak to you, and all of the stories and your development journey has been such an inspiration to not only me, but I'm sure to everybody who's watching on the YouTubes and listening on the podcasts. Thank you ever so much for watching. Happy coding, everyone. I'll see you again soon. Cheers. Bye.